Okay, so I'll give you a bit of an update today on some of our production and market update. Figures that are much different than they were a number of years ago, different in a good way. I'll also talk a bit about trade, the ongoings that we have with that, and I'll also discuss a bit about our promotion activities that we will be encountering. Okay, so I'll go through some slides, then I'll talk verbally on trade and promotion. So the market aspect of things, these are P5 figures. These are a lot of the figures that the P5 Quota Committee sees, and this is to a large extent what they make their going forward decisions on. So what you can see up there is the numbers, the year-over-year numbers from October of 16 to 17, and you can see we have some pretty nice numbers there on the right-hand side. Those are the increases in requirements and whatnot that we've had in the last 12 months from October 16 to October 17. We've been experiencing numbers like this for the last couple of years, and it certainly is refreshing. Just a graph with the same indication as the requirements. This graph is a 2-year graph plus the current year in yellow, just showing, you can see they do run kind of with each other, so to speak, but then again we're getting higher levels, which is reflective of the numbers on the first graph. Some of our monthly requirements. So another 4.4% in the last one. Total quota. Quota is a magic word for all of us. And the issuance of quota, and as Josh just remarked as well, the viability of the exchange in the last while has been very rewarding. It's working more like the way it was intended when it was created. And that's to try and get the quota into the hands of the producers who can produce it. Some of our dairy sales of some of our products that we have, fluid milk is unfortunate. It's a decline. It's a decline for a number of reasons. We used to sell a lot of fluid milk on breakfast, on cereals. But cereals aren't consumed that much anymore in the dairy household, in the households of our consumers. So that's a significant portion of our sales. We will be putting an emphasis on this, and I'll talk more about that when we get into the promotion part of it. But everything else, as you can see, is good. Ice cream, for the first time, actually had some positive numbers this past year, for the first time in the last few years. So it is, it's down right now, but it's been a rewarding as well. Stocks, this is not the stock exchange. This is stocks of product, dairy and product that we have. So butter stocks. It's kind of a seasonal picture, what you see there. Stocks are supposed to build in time for Christmas. And what processors will do is there's a plan A and a plan B. Plan A butter, plan B butter. Plan B butter is butter that's controlled by the processors, but they can submit it for storage to the CDC, and then they reclaim it back when they need it. Plan A, however, is butter that is stored by the CDC, but it's available for anybody to get. So the processor producing it does not have the right to that butter to reclaim that butter when they need it. The last couple of years there have been zero Plan A butter, and the reason for that is because butter's in such a high demand and the processors have not been able to meet their requirements. So they will not pass on any butter that they don't have control of. When there's no Plan A is when the CDC is the trigger point for CDC to import butter. Because Plan A, the further processors in this province, the cookies and the different things that they need butter to make, but they don't process their own, they get it from Plan A. So what was happening is plants were moving to the States to actually make their products down there, or they were importing. So now we have at least encouraged and got the CDC to understand that we need to import butter at that point in time when there's no Plan A and when stocks were low. It's not as bad as it sounds, because when butter is imported, it becomes part of the requirements of the dairy products in this province, in this country. So requirements are what we base our quota on. So that in turn does help to get quota increases, because the imports are calculated as requirements. So if you see the graph, what we have there now, we reached a peak this past Christmas, which was not quite at the target level. They targeted 35,000 tons of stock at the peak. 4 or 5 years ago, 20 to 22,000 tons was the targeted amount. I think it's about May or June of 2014, was it? Time magazine had a little swirl of butter on the front, and in my opinion, that was what triggered, to a large extent, the change in our butterfat requirements in this country and around the world. That time the scientists came and said, you know what? Butterfat will not kill you, like we have been saying it would for the past how many years. And I think that was the sensation, and that was the indication to trigger to our consumers that it's good. I personally feel, and I think it's true, that we now have a generation of consumers who have never tasted butterfat because they were brought up and lived on margarine. They never realized how good it is and the quality and the taste that you get from it. And I think we're gaining some new consumers that we never had. Another thing is, despite the fact that fluid milk is decreasing in the volume of milk sold, the amount of butterfat we sell in fluid milk is actually greater than it used to be. And that's because people who were drinking skim are now 1%, 1 is 2, 2's gone up to homo. The higher the butterfat level, the higher the taste, the better the taste you will receive. And once again, because Time Magazine, and Partial anyway, said that butterfat's not good to you, our consumers are switching more to higher butterfat, not only in milk, but in cheeses and in yogurts as well. So that in itself has required an extra butterfat requirement, and you all know what that means for quota. Cheese stocks, similarity there. We do now consider a higher level of cheese stocks are required than we used to have. Right now, we have a lot of suppliers, processors of cheese who cannot and do not have inventory of older aged cheese. And that's because when they put it away and intended to be 2 or 3 or 4 year old cheese, they ran out of cheese and they had to reach into their, what was supposed to be an inventory for the future to sell today. So we still have demand for cheese. Private and other butterfat stocks. You can see there the total. Now we're starting to drop down in our butterfat. And you notice that on the previous graph, the way the graph goes. Now's the time of year when we'll start to decrease. From the production aspect of it, this is, these are P5 numbers, a lot of these numbers. Like I said, the quota committee uses these. So you can see the November issue there over the October, and 105.3% issuance. Fall incentive uptake. Now this is a story here that there's a couple different things you have to consider. One of those, in the November figures, in November of this year was 3 days, for instance, and November of last year was 2 days. So you can see how your percentages have decreased. Still a good fill rate in comparison when you have that extra day. The 5 provinces and their uptake in comparison to last year. All negative figures at the bottom, but keeping in mind quota increases that have taken place since then. And of course, quota increases have to be filled prior to the opportunity to fill any incentive days. So that in itself is an explanation for why there's a lesser fill rate on the incentive days. Just a little color with the same information in graph form. Okay, forecast parameters. So we'll take a minute to explain a couple things. Number one, in supply management, we have a role to play, and we have a responsibility in supply management. Our responsibility is to fill our domestic market, and domestic market is what supply management is based on. That's getting difficult for some of us to do because our facilities are full, and they're full because, to a large extent, because of the quota increases. So I think one of the biggest problems we at the board have right now is to trying to look into that crystal ball, and when do we tell you that we need more milk and how much more do we need? We have an idea of how much we're going to need, and that's based to a large extent on projections of growth. We're still looking at a 4% growth approximately in the products, in the consumption of our products, which is good. But a bigger wild card now is the processing capacity that's going to be coming online with the new investments that we've had. Locally here, Teeswater has a big investment in Teeswater, and if you drive by the Gayley plant, you can see how it's starting to take shape. And it's very exciting as a dairy farmer to see that. So when these plants are building this, they're no different than we build a barn at home. We can't use it until it's built. But it's when it's built, we want to use it. We've got to make money out of it to pay for it. Processing plants are no different. They're going to have the capacity to process milk, but they won't have until it's finished. However, I know, and you know, that we just can't all of a sudden add an extra 300 or 400 million liters of milk to our supply, just like that. So what we have to do now at the board is to try and say to you, okay, a year out from now, we're going to need this. We might need it in incremental phases. Saskatchewan actually is increased over a 12-month period. They projected forth a 15% increase. Now, a large part of that was crystallization of existing incentive days that were there, and we as well have some of those in Ontario, in the P5. But we're right now trying to, on January 11th of next week and the 12th, the P5 Quota Committee will be meeting after our AGM and trying to look through and sort out as to what we can tell you in the future, because we do recognize that you need as much advance notice to prepare. If you're looking at a baby calf, you're looking at pretty well 3 years before you get some milk out of that animal, if you're just thinking about it. If you talk the gestation period and then raising that animal and getting the milk around her, you're looking at close to 3 years. So advance notice is important, and that's, I think, our biggest challenge now. But to rest assured, we will be needing more milk. It's a matter of when and how much. So these are some of the production parameters that we have. So you'll notice in 16-17, every province was up fairly significantly. And in 17-18, we're predicting the same. Now, every year is that much more because you're basing it on the previous year, which was higher than the year previous. So it's 8.3%. If PEI was 8.3% for 17-18, they would actually have more than an 8.3% increase from the previous year. Credit days, that's just what's going to happen to the credit days with increased production. We're going to shrink our credit days. Now, if you notice in Quebec, they're actually going to be increasing theirs, and some of this has to do with the fact as to what portion of the year they had their fill rate, whether it was during their fall incentive days or some of the others. It does get a little complicated. Some of the parameters, again, in the individual provinces. So the days, that's under credit days that are available. That's another very important thing, because another thing that the P5 Quota Committee looks at when they discuss quota increases are several things. Number one are the production requirements. Number two is inventory, which we saw up there with respect to cheese and butter stocks. Another thing they look at is under credits, because that is milk that is available to be produced and has a right to be produced and has to be marketed when it is. The problem is trying to predict when that's coming forward, because on top of all this, what we're looking at right now is not only juggling the production coming forward, but like I said, trying to link it with existing capacity plus the capacity that's coming down the road to try and match it up. We don't mind skimming milk in Ontario because of the butterfat requirements, and we have done it a lot over Christmas, but we do not want to be in a position to dump whole milk. That's not an option. We have to try and avoid that. Some more of the figures, just you can see what they're coming up there. Production and demand. When the lines are fairly close together, you're producing what we require, what our processors are asking for. When you have a spread there is when we're building inventory and building stocks. And that's because of some of the seasonality of some of the products. Milk allocation to plants. So as you can see there again, we've got an increased amount every year over the past 3 years, and we're projecting that we're going to get up to 19.591 million liters. This is an actual. Quebec's numbers in here as well. Not that we disregard Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, but the bulk, the vast majority of the milk is produced in Ontario and Quebec. So those are the two provinces that are focused on with respect to numbers and production potential when they go about establishing the rates that they do. Milk supply to plants. So our staff will, on a weekly basis, receive information and requests from plants for filling, for orders, and matching it up with the supply of milk that we have. Since about May of last year, we were short of milk. Sometimes 1 million, sometimes 2 million, sometimes 3 million liters a week. When I say short of milk, I mean we weren't able to fill all of the requests for milk from our processors that week. However, that has turned around as it always does with seasonality and the processing and at Christmas time. So you see some of the numbers there. I just pulled off. I don't think I have more recent numbers. Anyway, that's what's happening. But you'll notice what's happened is we've gone from a shortage to a surplus on December 6th to 12th. 520, yes. So actually for the week of December 12th or 13th to 19th, we were 120,000 liters in surplus. The week of December 20th to 26th, 2,580,000 liters of surplus. Now a lot of that is understood and expected, and that's just the way it is. This will probably carry through for another 10 days or so, and then we expect we'll be back into a deficit with respect to processing. So we do some special arrangements and endeavors, if we can, to try and help encourage our processors to skim extra milk over the season, and that's so that we can gain the butter fat from it. Another contributing factor we had this year, we had a fire at the Lava-Lachire processing plant. November 27th, it was a small fire in the bag house. Unfortunately, there was an explosion. Didn't destroy the building, but it did knock the doors off, which flew out to the transformer, which shut the hydro down for the plant, which didn't let the sprinkler system work. So it was a calamity of errors there. End result, that plant was shut down until December 6th. I think it was back up for taking butter and milk. They had that operation going that they could do that, but they couldn't dry. And actually on December 23rd, we got permission from the CDC. They did get the dryer functional so they could process animal grade powder. But that did help us because then we could work some more through that. So just getting back up, they're able to take the milk from Northern Ontario again. And in fact, Quebec was sending a bit of surplus in there over the holidays as well. So that was very lucky that we did get that going back up. It helped us a lot. So just in the summary, as I said, the issuance level is high. Butter stocks are starting to decrease again, keeping in mind what they're looking for is about a 35,000 ton inventory at the peak, and down from there. And as you can see, it's all frost as well. Okay, so now I'll talk a bit about trade. I guess it's a little over a year ago now that the dairy industry in Canada, in fact Canada and the whole world, shaken up a bit by the election of Donald Trump. He is a gentleman who is creating a lot of waves and a lot of extra work. We haven't come across too many people in the States, groups or individuals, that are in the same thought mind as him with respect to NAFTA. NAFTA is something that 35 of the states, their top trading partner is Canada. 20 of those states, their top trading partner is Ontario. 61% of the NAFTA trade is with the province of Ontario. So Ontario itself has a lot riding on this NAFTA negotiation. Ontario has a very good team at these trade talks. I've been at the trade talks, and Ontario has had their team there every time, and we do debrief with those on a daily basis down there, as well as meet with some of the others. The States has, I think it's in the Washington meetings when they came across with totally outrageous proposals, not just from a dairy perspective. There was 5 actually that hit the news that were deal breakers, and dairy wasn't one of them. Supply management wasn't one of them. They had the sunset clause, and the auto industry, and labor, Article 11, just so many that they came out with were ridiculous. Now, what it did do, it did make it easy for the Canadian and the Mexican government to just say, okay, it's not an operation, it's not an option at all. So they're going on. The next talks are in Montreal, the 23rd to the 28th of January rather. I expect that's going to be a fairly heavy session because it's projected that these talks have to be finished by March. Originally, it was the end of the year where Trump said, however, it's to March. 2 reasons for that is, number one is the presidential elections in Mexico will be happening, so they will not be in a talk position, as well as the bilateral collections in the States. they'll start running a little more full force at that point in time. So we expect the talks to wind down at that point in time. So we expect Montreal to be a pretty heavy session. Something else that Mr. Trump has done is he's pulled the United States out of TPP. TPP was originally a group of 12 countries getting together. At that point in time, the dairy concession was 3.25% in NAFTA, for NAFTA 12 that we had given up. We felt we could live with that, but the problem is now the states have pulled out, and the other 11 countries, the remaining 11 countries, have now, they haven't got an agreement, but it's an area to continue working with 4 exceptions that they want to revisit. And unfortunately, market supply, i.e. supply management, is not one of those sessions that want to work forward. So what's happening is that they're playing on finishing or holding that off, holding TPP off until NAFTA is done. Because if they would 3.25% would go ahead with TPP 11, that's not a good thing because it doesn't include the states. And the states will for sure be after access. And I wouldn't be expecting if they'd be after that much or more access. Because I think everybody understood with TPP 12, we did expect a lot or the vast majority of the dairy access would go to the states. So that's something that as well is an ongoing concern. We continue to lobby both our provincial and our federal government. Our provincial minister is very, very strong. In fact, our provincial minister and the Quebec minister were both at the last discussions. Where were we? Mexico the last time, I guess. And we had meetings, and my Quebec counterparts came up to me and said they were very impressed with Minister Leal and his steadfast support of agriculture. And I'll tell you, for the Quebec producers, to be very pleased with a politician and their support is a tremendous accolade for the minister. So it's something that we're very aware of and keeping a very close watch on. Another thing in promotion, you do all know that Dairy Farmers of Ontario and Dairy Farmers of Canada have agreed to disagree with respect to promotion, I guess is a polite way to put it. We will be withdrawing a large portion of our promotion funds from Dairy Farmers of Canada. We've been trying for 3+ years to reach an agreement and an understanding. What we wanted was, transparency. What are our producers, our promotion dollars? What's our return on that? Are they being spent wisely and are we good to go? I don't think any of us disagree with promotion, spending it. I think it's a good investment. But you have to be able to measure what you're getting from it, and we weren't getting that. So we're currently in the process of looking for an individual who can lead a promotion division at Dairy Farmers of Ontario, and then we'll be working around that person with the staff. We're looking at $40 to $45 million, which we contribute annually as your money to Dairy Farmers of Canada. So now the same holds true. We can't talk out of both sides of our mouth. We do expect the same from us, that we have to be accountable and make the decisions. Granted, not all the decisions will be good, but you have to be able to recognize those and say, do I tweak this or do I abandon it? Everyone enters these things with good intentions and it's all supposed to work, but it doesn't. Some of the things we will be continuing on with DFC and we do believe in is research. We believe in those. We believe in Nielsen numbers. Nielsen numbers is the recording that gives us the stats from our consumers, like the trends in our product sales. We definitely do need that. Education in the classroom. Dairy education, nutrition is absolutely essential, and we agree with that. So I don't think it's that we disagree a whole lot with the direction in which they were going. It's the roads that we take to get there. I think we still have the end game in mind, but we feel we need a different journey with identifiable results to get there. So that's the direction we'll be taking. So it's going to be a very busy year. The other thing I will say from a budget perspective, the budget will be voted on next week, approved next week. Some good news in it. There will no longer be a 2-cent CQM levy. It's coming off. And the administration levy will be dropping by 1 cent as well. That's in large part because we have extra milk. And when you collect on a per hectoliter basis, at the same rate, will give you more money than you did the year before. So it's come to the point in time when we have balanced our budget at DFO with a lower rate. We've based it on a 6% growth in production, though. So it's going to be a challenging budget for us to reach based on that requirement for increased production expectation. Okay? So suffice to say, it's very busy. Thank you for your attendance. Remain open for questions, and I'm very pleased and thankful for the opportunity to represent you. And I guess finally, I'd like to say a very happy New Year to all of you. And let's hope that this year can be as prosperous and great outlooking for the future in dairy as the past one has. Okay, thanks.
Any questions for Ralph back there?
Good afternoon, Ralph.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. Just wondering about the increased increased exports of skim milk powder that continue to hit the market. Is it a concern of DFO or DFC about us actually increasing our exports in a time of trade negotiations with the states and NAFTA and in TPP?
That's a good question, Paul. We're aware of it. I think we're conscious of it. I think supply management is a system that's based on supplying the domestic market, and that's our objective and that's our goal. I think the soft point on what you're saying is the fact that we are really not the problem with respect to the supply of milk in the world and the reasoning for the rest of the world to be on the downside of an industry. Despite the fact that the states are in the situation, they're still building for and projecting for huge increases in the supply of raw milk. So that's part of it. I think our Class 7, our ingredient strategy, is what's enabled us as a country to be competitive and to be able to compete in that, keeping in mind that the whole world is needing butterfat, and the whole world is going to have a byproduct then of skim milk powder, and it's going to become an increasing problem. I think what we have to work on, and we can work collectively as an industry, not in Canada, but with the states on this, is looking for opportunities to utilize that skim milk powder. And that's something where R&D has to go to. So yeah, we're aware of it, and we get it thrown in our face.
So with that, like, do you feel confident that we can defend against this? Like you said, it's being thrown in our face, and obviously our trading partners know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Is it defendable, and how much further are we willing as a country to take that? Like, are we going to allow the exports to continue to increase year over year? Are we better off to import butterfat instead of exporting so much skim milk powder when it comes down to trade negotiations?
Yeah, we still do import butterfat. I think what we lose track of, Paul, is that what they're saying about our system is that we're getting extra income from one section of our system so we can subsidize the skim milk powder. Let's not forget they're doing the same thing. You know, their Class 4 milk is the same. And it's going to come a time when we have to just explain to the rest of the world that, you know, we really are no different than anybody else. You know, they have a two-tier system for milk as well. So sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I think Canada has forever sat back and just listened and had people challenge us. So maybe a challenge from their part might enable us or position us to be able to explain our situation. So yes, there's no guarantees in this world, but when this ingredient strategy was initiated and dreamt of and worked through, we were very conscious of that aspect of it, and we received as good a legal opinion as we could all the way through this issue. And this legal opinion is legal opinion that the government would turn to for support as well. So we're comfortable.
Yeah, Ralph, that was a great presentation.
Thank you.
An update on the infant formula plant in Kingston. Where's it at status-wise, bricks and mortar? What % of it is going to be exported out of this country? Kind of an issue that Paul was bringing up. And is that a problem? How much of that plant is going to be exported? And what was my third question with it? You talk and it'll come to me.
So the infant plant, they have started construction. The last figure I heard, they said about 85% will be. That company, when they came, had opportunities to locate in the States as well as Canada. They chose Canada. I think one of the prime reasons they chose Canada is for the recognition of the quality of our product around the world. I've heard that in China themselves, if they see a product with a maple leaf on it in Canada, that's all they need, and they'll buy it. The consumers have confidence in it. So that company is aware of their hometown situation, and yes, they do have intentions to export back to their company, their country.
What are they estimating? 2020, you think, Ralph? That plant will be up and running for milk, looking for milk?
I think that's the projection. Yeah, 2020 is going to be here pretty soon. This is 2018 already.
And they need milk,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yes, yes.
And they,
Yes, they do.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yep, come in.
Hi, Ralph. Just a question on some of the surveys that were going on the DFO website. I think one of them, and just is just hearsay through producers that I've heard of it, about the capacity of everyone's facilities and what their potential for growth is. If you can just maybe comment on the intention of that survey and if the results are going to be coming out at some point, or what the plan is with it.
Yes, thank you, Harrison. Well, the intent of that is to try and give us a better picture of what we need to know to make the right indication to you of when we need how much milk. That's what it was, and yes, they will be coming out. Quebec did a survey, a very in-depth survey with respect to production potential in their province, and it will be duplicated to a large extent by the other P4 provinces, the 3 Maritimes and Ontario. We will be looking at this from a P5 perspective. Quebec has indicated at their meeting, which they had in November, which was actually a discussion on this for 2 days, they expect a 5% growth per year for the next 5 years. That's a very optimistic figure for Quebec. Quebec is normally the province who is least willing to go public with those expectations, so it says a lot for them to express that publicly. We just have to now continue to instill confidence in the producers to take that next step, because it's a big step. The huge financial commitment that's necessary for each of us to move forward is not something you can swing around and pay back in a short term. So we have to continue to provide that confidence and get those numbers to give not only the producers, but also the lending institutions have to have a comfort level as well. This is a good investment. So.
One last question here.
Okay.
Hey, Ralph. Just a question regarding new entrant programs. Do we see any changes to those coming in the future, just to allow more producers into the industry, kind of when there was no quota available for on the exchange to buy? I think it was a hot topic to slow down the amount of guys joining. Now there's a lot of quota for sale, and some producers getting out and selling quota. I do believe there's 28 applicants for the assistance program this year, and there's roughly 100 people on the non-assistance list. And our question is, are we losing too many producers that are not waiting the 7 years, because it's you got to do a lot of things in life before you wait 7 years for quota? Is there any talk of changing those programs or advancing, or giving those guys a little more chance of growth?
There's discussion, and there again, you're taking a P5 situation. There's 2 forms of discussion. Do you increase the number of new entrants, or do we increase the production capacity per new entrant? Like, is 35 kilos the right amount? So it is being looked at. Yes, it is. And 7 years you're exactly right. It is a long time. Okay. We're seeing that shorten a bit. The numbers are still there, but what we're finding is that as the numbers get closer to the 12-month when they have to make that final commitment of non-returnable money, the $10,000, it does become a trigger factor that allows some of them to back out. Okay. One thing I will close on is, I'm sure all of you know Peter Gould, or have heard of him. In case you're not aware, Peter had the very misfortune of losing his wife Geza on December 31st. Peter, it's so unfortunate, he came to a stage in his life when he's retired and is looking forward, I'm sure, to a lot of opportunity to have more time with Geza. And unfortunately, she lost a battle, a health battle, and has left us. So I was down Tuesday night to Peter's house. They had an open house, and the funeral is tomorrow at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Hanover. So I'd ask you that you keep Peter and his family in your thoughts and your prayers. Okay? Thank you all.